Welcome and thank you for logging on to this garage clip for the high performance training program. In the high performance training video that I would assume you've already watched, we used Kara as a model to demonstrate the lunge. In that program, you probably remember that we identified that she had some challenges with her lunge, and you may also remember that Kara is a tennis player. What I'd like to do now is give you a little sample of how I would work with Kara clinically, so you can get an idea of the kinds of things that you can do once you understand primal movement patterns, how to break them down, and how to essentially build them back up. To begin with, let's just watch Kara lunge again, and I'm going to point a couple of things out. What I'd like you to look for on the video as you're watching is the alignment of her knee over her second toe. I've put a line on there with an eyebrow liner pencil. If you're working with a client, you can just have them stand with their feet parallel, bend the knee slightly, put your fingertip on either side of the patella or the kneecap, draw a line, preferably black, right down the center of the kneecap, and put a second line on the second toe. That gives you a reference point. Now, what I'd like to point out before you begin watching her lunge is that at no time during the lunge, unless you're doing a lateral lunge or unless the body is turning, do you want to see that knee drop inside the second toe, particularly on the stabilizing leg, in other words, the front leg. So let's just watch as Kara lunges. She's going to lunge forward, 45, lateral, back 45, and back center on her right leg and then her left leg, so that those of you watching can see what that looks like, and then we'll break it down from there. So Kara, you go ahead and lunge. And pause right there. So right here, if you watch Kara lunge, as she comes into the lunge, she demonstrates what's called a Trendelenburg. She's got a mild Trendelenburg. As she drops into the lunge, you'll see her femur goes medially, which is essentially the same as the hip going into abduction. So if you just step back out of the lunge, now step right into it, more like you were reaching to hit a tennis ball. And right in there, you see her dropping in. It's very subtle, and it happens very quick. So step out of the lunge. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to step into the lunge and slowly drop in. Okay, so step and slowly drop in. And right here, it begins to happen. So keep going, keep going, keep going, and you can see the angle getting greater and greater, okay? This is an indicator of a weak gluteus medius, and it's also an indicator of a poorly stabilized sacroiliac joint on that side. So you see this inability to stabilize in the frontal plane, okay? And come back out. And let's have you step into that one all the way one more time. Okay? Now you see she is able to keep her knee over her second toe, which is a good sign. This hip problem right here, by the way, is very minor. Somebody that did not have training in orthopedic rehabilitation would probably miss it, but it happens very quick and it is there. Okay, so we're going to step back out, and now facing the front, step at a 45-degree angle and do not look toward me, look straight forward. Good, excellent. Okay, so drop down into that lunge, good. So she's doing a pretty good job here of keeping that knee over the second toe, and out you come. Good. And let's have you go straight lateral. Good. Okay. Now, is that as far as you can comfortably go? Okay. So what I mean by that is, go ahead and come back. I don't mean necessarily how wide you're going, but how deep you're going. Okay, so let's see how well you can come into the lunge on a lateral lunge. Good. Okay. So one of the things that I want to point out, and this is common even amongst world-class athletes, the further they deviate from the center or the sagittal plane, typically the weaker they are. So you see Kara not wanting to drop into that lunge position. That's a compromising position. One of the reasons she doesn't want to drop into that position is because, as I said earlier, her sacroiliac joint's not stabilizing very well over here, and this really puts you into a single-legged squat. It's half lunge and half squat over here. So what's happening is the brain does not want her to drop into this position, because the further in she goes, the more stability she needs from the SI joint. You can come out of there. So she's avoiding that. So what it does is it creates a functional weakness. Now, as a tennis player, if she has to reach to hit a ball, what's going to happen is she's much more likely to miss a ball, because she won't go any deeper into that lateral lunge than her brain deems safe and secure. Now, if you were just looking at me from here, if I stop right here, well, then that's a lot of distance she's missing in her tennis performance. So if I was a competitor to her and I knew what was going on with her body, I could easily place the ball outside of her reach, because she's got a functional weakness there. So now let's have you step back 45 and stay facing the front. Okay, now that's your first indicator that her nervous system does not want to go into this territory. She did a straight backward lunge. She totally avoided backward 45, which you'll see in people that have instability. So step back out of the lunge. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is look at me. This is where I want you to lunge to. Now look forward, and now lunge to me. Good. Okay, so there you see another common indicator. One, she's not actually doing a lunge. Notice that she's left her heel on the ground. That isn't a lunge, okay? So her brain, she's just taught us another thing. Her brain does not have a pattern for lunging at that angle. So if she has to do that in a tennis match, she'll avoid doing it because the brain doesn't know how to do it, and at the speed the ball moves, she won't have time to figure it out. So right away, we know we need to teach her how to do a backward 45-degree lunge. So what I'd like you to do is just let that heel come up off the ground, let your foot pivot and drop down into the lunge and look straight forward. Let that knee bend, and let the heel come up, bend the knee, okay? So what you're doing is this. You're letting that turn and you're staying forward. You follow that? Because you're not letting that happen, it locks your pelvis up, which is very potentially damaging to the low back. Okay, so right now I'm essentially teaching her how to do a backward 45-degree lunge. Anytime you identify a pattern like this where the athlete doesn't want to move into it, it's a functional discrepancy, it's a weakness. Because I can guarantee you there's many opportunities in a tennis match to move in that plane, but because her brain doesn't want to go there, it leaves a hole in her game, essentially. So come back out of there. And now just go back center. Straight back. Good. Okay. And there you see what's called short stepping the lunge. She does not move very deeply into the lunge at all. You'll see the weaker an individual is, the less depth they will allow in the lunge or the squat, because the further you bend the knee, the more force it takes to straighten the knee. So in anyone that suffers functional weakness, they never want to go very deep into the lunge, and they don't want to stretch the lunge very much at all either. You'll also see in people that have weak butt muscles, they don't want to take a full lunge step because it requires the use of the butt. What they'll do is they'll short step the lunge, which brings the knee forward more, and that overworks the quadriceps, which is one of the reasons that we have so many ACL injuries today due to what is called quadriceps dominance. It might interest you to know that doing any kind of machine training for the legs is very, very likely to enhance that pathology. So for athletes that have to run, doing things like knee extensions, hamstring curls, and leg presses is a terrible idea, because it trains the muscles of the leg to work either in isolation. So if you do knee extensions, you don't use your hamstrings and your glutes, so it trains the brain to over-recruit the quadriceps, which causes anterior shear on the tibia. Yet in a functional environment, you could never recruit the quadriceps more than the hamstrings, because they're functional antagonists of each other. So Kara, now that we've seen that, why don't you go ahead and demonstrate the lunge in each of those positions on the other leg. Okay, so you saw the same Trendelenburg sign, the hip dropping out. 45. Good. There you see the short step in the lunge. Okay, again, you see that she won't go very deep into the pattern. Backward 45. And there you saw she skipped the 45 pattern again. So we have a true functional deficit. This means that her sensory motor system does not know how to do that pattern, which is important for a tennis player to learn. So now what I'd like to do is show you a couple of techniques that you can use and that you can teach the client to use to improve themselves. So we're going to start with the Total Gym functional grid here. So let's have you position on the grid as I showed you earlier. So what you do is you position the athlete or the individual so that the great toe joint is on the horizontal line, second toe is on the vertical line, and the heel is also lined up, so the foot's basically perpendicular. Okay, great toe joint on the horizontal line, second toe on the vertical line. Now, Kara, what I'd like you to do is stand on that leg, and with this leg, I want you to reach out and touch as far as you can go while looking in the mirror and never letting that line on the knee drop inside the second toe, and never let the heel come off the ground, and never step. So no stepping. It's a reach and a touch, a reach and a touch. And I want you to work the 180 line, the 135 line, the lateral, the 45, and the backward line. Okay? Okay, now you see how your heel just came off the ground? And you stepped. Remember, it's a toe touch, not a step. Okay, good. And back. Okay? And let's go to the 135 line. Now stop, look in the mirror, look at the knee. Is that in the right position? So what muscles have you got to use to put that back in place? So stay where you're at. Okay, now correct that position of the knee. Okay, so what I need you to do is this. Put your fingers right here in these muscles. Feel those muscles? Now I want you to do this. Wiggle your knee like that, in and out. No, the other one. The one you're standing on. Okay, feel that? Yeah. Good. So now you see how when you lunge in the mirror, that line on your knee is dropping in, okay? So I want you, with your knowledge of these muscles now, so to step. But as you're stepping, try to use your brain to keep those muscles turned on. Go ahead. Good. Okay, so you see how you're better able to do that by concentrating now. Can you feel that? You can feel those muscles working? Now just let them shut off. There, you see how the knee starts to drop in. So now that you're there, just pull the knee outward. That's good. See how you're learning to connect to those muscles. Those are the muscles that are lazy in you. Okay? So what we would do then with Kara is we would take her through each of the positions that she is unable to keep the alignment of the knee over the toes, and use those reference points to teach her how to activate each of the weak muscles. We must look at the chest position. We must make sure she activates the core with a gentle drawing in of the abdomen, chest up, good posture, cheek over collarbone. And as we work through these patterns, she learns where her weaknesses are, and she learns how to use her own muscles to make the correction. What you want to watch for is to, one, make sure she's got a mirror to look at, or your client has a mirror. Two, we want to make sure that the hips don't drop out. So as she's reaching with this leg, we don't want to see that happening. Everything needs to be beautifully stacked up. They should never step, and the heel should never come off of the ground. You will find that this is very, very tiring for the working leg, so only do as many repetitions as you can do with your client with perfect form. Take a rest, 1 minute to 2.5 minutes as needed. In the beginning, alternate one leg to the other. As the individual gets stronger, you can do the same leg, rest, same leg, rest. Work all one leg 3 sets in a row, then switch legs, which will build the strength up faster. Once they can make 3 sets, reaching a good distance and holding stability on each leg, you're ready to reintroduce the lunge again.